I agree, but now like everybody seems to know it, and our win rate still isn't reflecting it. So
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and do a.
Um,
Sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say I've been playing like the 45 Scion Bomb since like last December. So like I've been having a
Wow.
great time the whole year, you know. So
Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into this. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tactical Debrief. As always, it is Joshua Joshi Howard. I'm joined here by Wesley St. Hines. Is that how you say it?
yes, St.
All right,
Hines.
we did. I like getting people's names correct. But anyway, you just came off of a recent win off of a new GT, Wes, and I gotta say, this is not the first time I've seen your name pop up with this kind of list. So before we even talk about that, I want to get a major thing out of the way, and that is you have been running this crazy Halo-themed list where every time I look at it, it takes me like an extra 2 or 3 minutes to process what I'm reading when I'm looking at all of the like the lore stuff they've added to your list. So could you go ahead and tell us where this cross contamination came from between your 40K and your Halo fandom?
Yeah, I mean the first part of it is just I really enjoy Halo as a whole.
Hmm.
My brothers and I just grew up a lot playing it on, you know, the original Xbox, then the 360 when we moved up to say like Reach and whatnot. Um, so I mean, I really like that, and so the original thought process started with, well, my local game store is really okay with proxies and count as, and
Hmm.
so if I want to do a Halo themed army, like what's the best way to go about it? And Imperial Guard just kind of seemed like the natural right choice. A lot of the model sizes are in the right area, and a lot of just the special weapons are really easy to be like, oh, this sniper rifle is a sniper rifle.
Yeah,
This rocket launcher is a grenade launcher. And it also was really easy to make as a whole because a lot of the models are readily available online. If you search like Halo Ground Command STL files, because the recently discontinued tabletop game Halo Ground Command, all of the STLs are available for free online.
I didn't.
Um,
I didn't know that they had a tabletop game at all.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
were you playing that before you started playing 40K?
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Not nearly as much, but yeah. And so all I've done, I don't know if you've seen a whole lot of pictures there, but the only thing I've really done is gone into like Fusion 360 and just taken plasma guns and melta guns and spliced those onto the models.
Nice.
So like the army is as WYSIWYG as I could make it, and it's all Halo themed and looks. I don't know, I like it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah,
That's super cool. Now, I do have to ask, like, I can tell when I was reading through it, like, these are all just named characters that you lifted from the game. So, like, how did you decide who was what when you were building your army?
Uh, so I wanted to start with just like named characters that I'm sure everyone would recognize because there's a lot of characters that like people would recognize but also don't fit super well.
Hmm.
For example, like the three prophets from the Covenant. Cool characters, everyone knows them, but they don't make any sense. And
Not in a
so
guard army, anyway.
exactly, yeah. And step one was what characters A do I have files for,
Hmm.
so I don't have to do a whole lot of groundwork, and B are like the most recognizable. And so that started with like Master Chief, George, and then like Noble Team, Alpha 9, the ODST squad, and then obviously the two big named characters, Miranda and Jacob Keys.
Yeah,
And I thought it made sense if I was going to model my Kriegsmen after Combat Evolved Marines, that Miranda and Jacob Keys should be the Marshals because they're leading the Combat Evolved Marines. It made sense for the lovely Noble Team to be the command squad because obviously you're down to Noble Six, the sixth Spartan, but the other five are there, and there's also already they use the weapons that the command squad have, right?
true,
It
yeah.
uses it uses an energy sword, which really nicely with a power sword, right? Um, and then obviously we don't have Leontis in the list. Leontis is Master Chief. He's riding a mongoose with an energy sword in the air.
That's awesome.
So that's why he's not in the list at least. But that was kind of where I started, yeah.
Yeah,
And for lesser named things like command squads, I was like, well, I want to have some, not everybody be a named character, but some have importance. So I used the combat evolved generic officer uniform and then just made it match the Scion base
cool.
game.
Now, you mentioned that you're going to WCW, the World Championships of Warhammer, for anyone who's not as familiar. And it sounds like you have not gotten the clearance to play all of your Halo models there. So what's the process looking like to convert or build up a normal army for the actual event?
Um, I guess my initial thing though, the way you worded it, is there any form of clearance? Because when I was reading through the player packet, the impression I got was strictly GW, no count as at all. Because if they do that, I'm tempted to shoot an email and be like, hey, can I do this? Is this okay?
I would
But
definitely recommend shooting them an email because I know that at least like Nick Jagiello, one of the strong players up in Canada, who's also appeared on this channel, go check that out. I would say like he has a very heavily converted like chaos themed guardsman army that I think uses like shrunken Crassus models as his chimeras. So I know that it is not like pure GW. He's done at least a little bit of 3D printing. So there's a real opportunity that like if you ask them, they might say yes.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. Um, in terms of the actual going about it process, I already had Aquilons from the get go
Hmm.
because despite all the Halo stuff, I told myself that if I am proxying Aquilons, that might get a few people mad at me as well. So I got the 30 Aquilons, and then I got all the Scions just because I like the model.
Yeah.
But all the rest, I have a lot of friends here in Tundra Tactics who play guard, and they've been, really nice and supplied a large portion of the army for me to use. That being said, my army's going to look really disgusting because of it's 5 different paint schemes.
Yeah.
It's gonna look bad, but I don't know. I'm happy to go. I know I'm not playing for best whatever they call it, best general or whatever for paint scheme
Mhm.
and score. Um, but it's 5 different armies of guardsmen. I'm happy to
Yeah.
be able to be there.
I mean, you're just really leaning into the combined regiment. That's your detachment right now, right? You
Exactly.
just like
Yeah.
throw
Right.
things all in the same spot. But let's go ahead and start talking about like your history as a player, because like I mentioned, I first saw your name, I want to say, on the last data slate, because I have this really awesome spreadsheet where I saw you starting to do a little bit better with this very unconventional style of list, which is almost entirely infantry coming through. Is this like is this your platonic ideal of what the guard looks like, or is this something that you just found for yourself that has been working?
So the biggest reason why I enjoy it is that it breaks parity. Right? Because like a big thing in like ninth edition was the idea that you win the moment the game starts just slowly bleeding your opponent, and like you don't have to play that way, but it works, right?
Yeah.
And infantry guard is insanely good at that, particularly like Catachans and Kriegsmen. The second you go, hey, in order to stop me from scoring my 5 points, you have to kill all 21 of my Kriegsmen on this point, and you have to kill them because they auto pass battle shock and they're 3 OC a model. Whereas your 5 Deathwing Knights in your home objective, I'm just going to advance 10 Catachan on, and that's mine now. I'm sorry, right? Um, and so that's what I really liked about infantry cars. It breaks parity. The reason I actually started running the list was because I had a big distaste for Solar as a whole. I He's a cool model and
He's
he's a
Master
good
Chief.
model, exactly. But he's a mandatory model, and I hate that mindset. And so originally I was like, well, what's the cool way that we can account for this without making it just be like, oh, I'm intentionally nerfing myself.
Mhm.
And so back in the December 2023 data slate, when they brought Kasrkin up to 110 and Scions back down to 100
Mhm.
from 120, I believe it was, I was like, oh, this is cool. We could make a Command Squad or Warlord, make them battle line, and just try out 75 Scions and see how it goes. And then I put a good 10, 15 reps into that and very quickly went, this is not okay. This is way too strong. And I think we're starting to reach that point with everyone else, where everyone started putting command squads in their units, like a one or two of, and they were like, wait, these are consistently performing. What if we did two or three? And now we're like, okay, it's just run, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's how the list evolved. It started with like an intentional little like, oh, let's do this cool thing. It went really well, and then realized it went really really well.
Yeah.
So
Were you putting armor back in the list back in the day, or is this like relatively, or has this been there from the beginning where it's almost strictly infantry?
the first iteration was one basilisk and a tank commander and two hellhounds. That was it for armor.
Hmm.
That's the heaviest it's ever been, and it very quickly got lighter.
Yeah.
Because once I don't know, I do a lot of like stats as well. Once you start running the numbers on just how hard Kasrkin and Scion shoot, it's obviously worse into T10 like 2-up save bodies, but it's really not by much. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm happy to give up a little bit of my overall DPS if it means you have zero good targets for your anti tank.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it evolved to.
Well, let's go ahead then and get into the list that you took to the most recent event that you went undefeated at and got like I think you had one game where you didn't score 100.
Yeah, it's my team's been giving me a little bit of hate for it because I've done 27 games, I think.
Nice.
No, 20, 23 at like GTs or larger tournaments, and
Yeah.
that was the first not 100 that this list has pulled.
Oh, I can't believe
Um,
it.
yeah. Um, yeah. Is there anywhere in particular you want me to start or go through it or
It's
any of
your
that stuff?
list. I mean, you know your list way better than I do. So let's go ahead and wherever you think is the most relevant pieces.
Sure. So the list's main idea is built around like a turn one deal with me into a turn two hammer, is kind of
Hmm.
the best way to probably say it. It's a lot of units that are just very hard to take off the table and very hard to get to even try to. That just creep up the board into turn one, turn two, and you as a player have to go, well, I can't give you 30 points over 2 turns. I need to answer this. And then there's just a very quick hammer that responds to it. So the main thing about infantry guard is we're filled to the brim with a lot of scout units, because we're putting usually about 120 to 130 models on the table in our deployment, and so it's really important that the core of the front list is 30 Kasrkin, and I believe this is the 20 Catachan list. It is.
Nice.
Sorry, usually there's
Yeah,
30
which
Catachan.
edition is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Usually there's 30 Kasrkin, 30 Catachan. My team really wanted me to test out a Scout Sentinel because it denies a redraw and bring it down, which
Hmm.
they said would be cool. Um, but so yeah, the core of the list, the first wave is 60 Scout units that use their Scout to never get shot, essentially. And so, in terms of what we're actually setting up, we have two Kriegsman bricks with two Marshals as really the only other things that get put on the table that need to actually press forward. And so those, 90-ish to 100 models, their whole job is just to press forward and go, these are our objectives, you have to deal with them. And then when the opponent inevitably does, the rest of the list is the hammer. It's 30 Aquilons and 45 Scions and Deep Strike that just answer whatever it is that's stepped out. The Aquilons don't usually play as a hammer because most players, at least when you get the higher level of like tables, go, well, if I just let you shoot me, I die. And so usually the Aquilons are forced to play objective games, which is totally fine. But usually they don't do many fancy shenanigans. We don't take a whole lot of advantage of like
Hmm.
the 3 inch rapid ingress, for example, because I don't really care about protecting Kriegsmen from a charge as you would like say a Rogaldorn.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's the list is the core is 30 Catachan and 30 Kasrkin usually that just push forward and set up the early game. They get that turn one to get forward and get on objectives. The turn two, once they usually get cleared, is usually Scions kill the things that answer them, and then the Kriegsmen push onto those objectives at that point. And usually, once you've lost, the majority of your opponent's front line that's meant to actually deal with those models, there isn't really a whole lot that can take those Kriegsmen off the points at that point.
Hmm.
Um, I think I had one game that was streamed against Kevin and the Chaos Demons, but across the 5 games, I believe like the Kriegsmen were killed like 3 total times. You just wear them down very quickly, and you just go, hey, you are now out of resources that can kill 20 effective 3-up save 5 feel no pain bodies. Um, sorry, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean it's really cool. So I got a couple questions right away. Firstly, what are you doing to protect your home objective?
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Okay.
If it goes away, it goes away. Because that's, I don't know, like, don't get me wrong, if you have 9-inch deep strikes, I'll
Yeah.
screen them, right? That's the Cadians can screen, that's their job.
Yeah.
Um, but the army is like a slow lurching tide, right? It just goes forward and goes forward and goes forward, and answering it is bad for you, but you need to, and it responds. And so if I unless it's like linchpin and it matters a whole lot, usually the list goes. I'm totally fine being in the middle, getting flanked from your home and my home, but if I hold all 3 objectives in the center, I'm winning,
Yeah.
and that's usually fine.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a
Um,
very different perspective than I've typically heard. I know, like, especially in Pariah Nexus, the home objective is mattered less than basically any other,
yeah.
um, like mission pack that we played on before. But the other major thing that I look at is what is Sly Marbo doing in this list?
So Sly Marbo is everyone thinks he's like the main thing that's thrown in
I
there.
think he's
He
like
is
hovering just under the surface. You know?
yeah, he is actually insanely good in the list.
Okay.
In the stream game, I feel terrible because I used him as bad as I possibly could, and then he just died. But one thing that's really good is when this list does run into a matchup where you're like, oh shoot, I can't deal with this, say you're facing 6 Brigands and Chaos Knights all with indirect fire, or you're against like a weird Space Marine list that has 3 Repulsor Executioners, and you're like, okay, there's all this random chaff fire now is an issue. You just go cleanse and establish locus every single game. And the reason behind that is Marbo is the only move shoot move in the game that does not say in your shooting phase after this model has shot. He just says after this model has shot. And so the important thing there is when your opponent goes up to deal with Marbo, you can just use Ursula's free stratagem to let him overwatch and move him behind a wall.
Okay.
Um, and so every turn he walks forward, cleanses the center. They go up to deal with him. He just moves out. You then kill the thing that went to go deal with him and move him right back onto the objective and do it again.
That might be the most insane guard-specific tech I have ever heard.
Yeah, he's regiment too, and so
Yeah.
with move, 9 inches is exactly enough to get him behind any safe side ruin on any of their
Yeah.
agreement maps.
Wow.
So
Okay. All
yeah,
right. Is this some? How often do you find yourself actually using this strategy? Is it something that you only do into armies that do have enough anti-chaff shooting, or is it something that you? Is it one of the game plans you generally go into a game with?
if I am genuinely worried about getting tabled in the game, I usually will go for that and then just play for the middle and the safe side. Because there's a few games I probably should have done this in the game against Kevin on stream, but usually if I'm going, hey, I would love to contest your safe side objective, but doing so is going to lead to me getting tabled. I just go, I'm going to never let you play on my side of the table the entire game. I'll spend the time 3 inch deep striking 3 inch deep striking my DZ, not letting you ever come into here. So half of your cards very quickly become unscorable. And I am just going to do 5 cleanses, and my 3 Aquilons plus the reinforced Aquilon are just going to get me 16 on Locus and then an 18th Locus on turn one.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
you said the situation where you go, I have scored 38 secondary. You have next to no way to stop it. We're now playing a primary game, and I win the primary game.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. So
mm,
obviously, when people look at this, their first thought is always going to be like, okay, well, this is obviously a skew list. There are going to be matchups that you're going to run into that are inherently unwinnable. Do you find that true? And if so, what are the bad matchups?
uh, everyone asks that,
I
and
mean, it's a natural thought, right? It is a skew list at the end of the day.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the thing is what I mean is like even the people I was traveling with like on a team, they were like, what beats it? Um, and as I was saying earlier, the list has pulled 22 100s and 174
Mhm.
in terms of in person play at GTs or higher. Um, and because everyone always goes, oh, tanks are a big issue, like Imperial Knights are a big issue. And when you sit down and actually start looking at like the math behind it, the list shoots 80 something plasma shots on twos. And so you go, hey, I know I'm on fives to wound, but I should still hit almost everything because it's twos rerolling ones. And so I'm putting like 25 wounds into you. It doesn't matter if you're a 400-point Questoris Knight, you're still failing like 16, 17 saves, taking 30 plus damage and dying. And the same is true for the Melta, right? There's about 25 shots of Melta on the list as well that will just tear through things. Um, and it's not this tournament, but the tournament before it, I went to Dragonfall, which was an 8 round event. And in 7 of my 8 games, my opponent was tabled prior to turn three. Sorry, prior to turn four. They were tabled
Yeah.
in turn three. Um, and so what I tell people is I think 12 Chaos Knights, all with indirect launchers, are pretty annoying. And then the joke list is not a joke list, but it's been going around recently, and I hate it. Is the triple acid spray Tyranno effects because that list is really scary.
Yeah. I don't think
Um,
I've ever seen triple acid spray Tyrannofexes. I've seen triple rupture cannon, but I think
yeah,
that's an uncommon enough list that, you don't really think about it whenever you go to an event.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's also weird because a lot of people go, well, melee should be an issue, and it should. But that's the thing that guard, especially infantry guard, just really is good into is you just go, hey, here's 30 Catachan and lovely wall, and then they kill them, and all of a sudden all their 8 bound or all their wardens die from the plasma melta, and then you go, cool, now here's 30 Kasrkin and a lovely wall, and then it dies. You go, cool, now here's 30 Aquilons and a lovely, and
Yeah.
it's just too many walls for them to get through.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. Because I think the other major thing that positions your list really well is a lot of the melee lists right now are only bringing like three, maybe four things that are really going to be chewing their way through at least a unit of 10 guardsmen per turn. And if you kill two of them on your swing back with the Scions and the Kasrkin, they're they're very rapidly running out of threats to take you
Mhm.
down. So that I actually think is really really interesting. So I mean the Chaos Knights make sense because they just have this volume of 6-1-1 shooting or 6-2-1 a lot of the
Mhm.
time. So you oftentimes are not getting saves there. I'm just trying to think like
Well, I get force. That's the thing that always
I yeah
confuses
that's
me.
fair, especially for like the Kriegs and stuff. Yeah.
Well,
Um.
well, no, genuinely, because I was gonna say that that argument is why people because people are like, oh, Grey Knight should be an issue, and
Mhm.
it's not. Because the thing that always confuses everyone is take cover and being in cover effectively put guardsmen on 2-up saves. Effectively, right?
Oh
'Cause you
yeah
can't
yeah. If you
have a
start with a
2-up.
four, if you start with a four,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and the majority of the army does, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the Catachan don't, and the Kriegsmen don't, but all the Scions, Aquilons, and Kasrkin do. And I have this photo that I always love to show people. I don't have it on hand, but it's of the Unit Crunch math site, you know,
Mhm.
and it is that 180 Stormbolter shots on threes and threes into Kriegsmen do not kill the squad. And everyone looks at that and they go, "Wait, what?" And it's well, because you go down, right? It's like 120 of them hit.
Yeah.
Like 80ish of them. I'm just going off my mental here, but like
Yeah.
80 of them wound. They save on threes, so they only fail like 25, and then they 5-up field no pain about 8 to 9 and live. And so it's like 180 Stormbolter shots do not kill 20 Kriegsmen.
Yeah.
And so everyone goes, "Oh, well, this part's easy," and it's not. The brigands are annoying because AP2 is a nightmare.
Yeah.
That's an issue. But if you're AP0, this list loves that. It's really good into AP0 mass
Yeah,
shooting.
interesting. Yeah, because I know like a lot of people. I remember seeing a lot more Krieg bricks earlier in the edition. He's partly because we got more value out of reinforcements, but also because I think a lot of people moved away from them because they weren't skewing as hard into the infantry. They didn't have. You were generally still bringing like Rogel Dorans or Lehman Russes that the anti tank had useful things to shoot at, and you just removed that entirely. So let's go ahead and
Yeah.
talk about that then a little bit, because you said you've been playing variations of this list since December. My first big thing is, was this list better when we had unlimited reinforcements?
Um, honestly, and I I've been thinking about this one a lot because I went to one GT in Wausau, I want to say that it was like literally 2 days before Pariah dropped. It was that weekend, you know.
Hmm.
And the whole question everyone said was, I can't wait for your list to get worse when you lose reinforcements. And the fact of the matter is, I I don't think it's a nerf.
Hmm.
Like, would I like to use reinforcements multiple times? Sure, but the fact of the matter is, this is a list that prioritizes winning the game, right? It doesn't prioritize throwing bodies at you. It prioritizes scoring as much points as possible. And so, I mean, you get 10 to 15 CP depending on Ursula and Voxcasters a game. And so usually a good 2 to 3 of it is used on rapid ingresses or some other form of movement shenanigans. We usually use 2 to 3 just to grenades and knock people off objectives. And then almost all the rest of my CP is just, oh, was this secondary not scoreable? Redraw it. And so I care so much more about having access to always getting 8+ points on secondary every turn to get my 40, as opposed to actually having those revives for the guys. And also, not to mention, the lethal hit Overwatch on Scions is so not okay. It's so
Yeah.
unhealthy. Um, and
Yeah.
anybody who's watching this who's like, is it unhealthy? Just deal with it one time. Roll it into one of your units and be
Yeah.
like, hey, why did my entire 10 man of Space Marines die to an 170-point guardsman unit, right?
Yeah. And I know as a
Yeah.
unit crunch aficionado yourself, you'll appreciate that if you haven't played against it before, Scions overwatching something on objective with lethal hits are functionally overwatching on threes. So
Yes.
like
Yes.
it's kind of dumb. Like they just get a normal shooting phase for Scions just coming out, and it becomes absolutely wild.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so it's really really interesting. So I guess the other thing then, you said you're spending about 2 to 3 CP on rapid ingress. Is there anything outside of the deep striking units that are you're generally putting in reserves?
No, I'd love to put more off the table, and sometimes I do.
Hmm.
But the units that just have deep strike is what 780 points. And so depending on the matchup, I really usually can't afford to because if people do just go on the line and go first. You can kind of intentionally put yourself on the back foot a little too hard. The last game I had against Death Guard round 5, he just said if I go second, I lose. Put everything on the line and just prayed he win first. And he did, and it was a little hard for a little bit because I was down just like 800 points of shooting,
Yeah.
because of that. So usually no.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, the other thing I'm kind of noticing about your list that we haven't talked about is all of your Silent Command squads have command rods. So what is the thought process there as opposed to bringing plasma pistols, which is normally what I go for?
Um, it is almost always it. So the way that the unit plays is that adding both +1 to hit and +1 to attack is just absurd on the
Hmm.
squads. And so there's the whole reason Gaunt's Ghost is in the list is you always just put down the signs, pointing out where they want to shoot, and then you daisy chain out 2 to 3 las guns from each of the 2 squads that have been put down, so that Gaunt can come down within 6 of both of them and double order both of the squads. Right, because they self
Mm-hmm.
order themselves, then Gaunt double orders them as well. Um, because as the second you add +1 attack to all of your rapid fire weapons, the DPS just skyrockets.
Yeah.
Right, you're getting like 33% more plasma. You're getting like an extra 6, 7 shots of las gun and notch off volley gun. Um, that's just way better than just one plasma pistol, right? Off the plasma guns alone, you're getting 3 shots instead of
Yeah.
one shot with
Well,
+1.
normally, I mean, I'm going for the first ring fire, second ring fire. It's usually the take
Yeah.
aim that I'm dropping because I'm overkilling all of Sion's like preferred targets. You're generally overkilling
Yep.
with just the one order. But I suppose it makes a lot of sense, especially if you're going to be shooting one. This list needs anti tank on things that are not on objectives, and so hitting
Yep.
twos, rerolling ones is almost as good as twos rerolling or threes rerolling everything, especially into
Yep.
the kind of targets you're shooting at. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
The
Um,
general mindset is if it's on an objective, +1 to attack. If it's off an objective, +1 to hit.
yeah.
And then if you are able to do both, always do both.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I usually approach it.
Yeah, makes sense. So I also want to ask a different question because the reason why I didn't reach out to you before this last event was the previous event that I remember seeing you go to, which was Dragon something, Dragonfall.
Dragonfall, that would be the last one I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
What the
event is
heck?
a BCP nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember looking at this and like asking like four questions to my friends, like, what the heck happened here? There are two of your opponents that just aren't in the VCP roster.
Yeah. So I I don't know if they're newer to it at all, but we had like 60, 70-ish people, I want to say, to begin with.
Yeah, they ended with 25.
Yeah, and it's because if you didn't show up day 3, they just dropped you from the tournament. Uh, and so a bunch of people didn't show up day 3 because it was a charity event and there was a lot of cool things happening. And
Yeah,
they were like, well, I've played 6 games of 40K. I think I'd rather do the charity raffles and the events and all the stuff's
yeah,
going on. And they just dropped all of them from the tournament.
gotcha.
But then they still kept putting scoring things in for people who showed up, and so that's why you have people who are like in 4th place, 5th place, who are like 3 and 5 or something. I
Yeah,
forget
so
who
I
the
was
highest one
weird.
is, but it's
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
definitely would have asked you to interview off of that one, but I was like, I can't tell what's happening in this event. I don't know if
yeah,
this player is like actually good or just like, something weird happened. So, apologies for
yeah.
taking too long. It's not your
No,
fault.
no.
So with that in mind, then, at the most recent event that you went to, which was a Gem City GT, 93 player event, let's go ahead and talk about your games a little bit that you actually played. I know you mentioned that one of them was on stream, but you played four of them off stream, and I gotta say, first off, the other thing I track is how impressive of a win people generally have. So like, how many wins are your opponents generally getting? You
Mhm.
only had one opponent that didn't have a positive record at the event. So already a very
Yes.
impressive event overall. But let's go ahead and start with the first one. We were playing up against Imperial Knights, and the things I'm mostly looking for here, Wesley, are one: is there anything like it? Are there any like technical plays that you don't think most people would know about? Two, what is the general like game plan look into this? And then three, is there like anything generally teachable for people who are not used to seeing this kind of list?
Yeah. So Imperial Knights, we were on. Let's see, it was mission A, right? So it was our first
Hmm.
first like tipping point. It's just the standard tipping point,
Yeah.
take and hold,
Oh,
and then
real quick,
raise
this was all
banners.
on Games Workshop, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So this was layout 2, take and hold, raise banners, and tipping point. That sounds right to me. Hopefully it's not. It's
It
just
seems reasonable to
layout
me.
A, right? My opponent was playing a weird list. He was playing 5 Questoris Knights. And
Okay.
we yeah, it was just 5. It was double
Yeah.
errant, double gallant, and a lancer, I believe it was. And it was a weird matchup because he did the thing where he was like, "Oh, you have so much off the board in deep strike. I went first. I'm just gonna run at you."
That's usually
Um,
correct.
yeah, and it led to just a really quick game. If I recall, there was two knights on the table going to the start of his third turn. He lost one of them completely turn one, and one was bracketed turn one. And then he goes into turn two, and he's like, "Ah, my 8 attacks kill 8 guys," and I'm like, "Cool," you know. And so by the end of his turn two, he's down to a knight, and we just call the game and go forward.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, the big thing with the Knights matchup is just the Kasrkin are a lot more king than they actually seem. There's a really big joy of just setting up all three of the Kasrkin within about 18, 20 inches of each other, so that if a Knight player does run at you, which is what a lot of them have to do if they don't have a whole lot of armigers, which is the case with Imperial Knights, where you can just go, hey, here's all three of the Kasrkin, take 8d3 mortal wounds and die. And it's totally worth doing that, right? Three
Yeah.
Kasrkin are cheaper than a Quistor's Knight, and so just running at people and killing them a-okay. And so that's how that matchup played. Is the Lancer went in the middle, all three of the Kasrkin pushed up, shot their petty shots into the random knights to try and score marked for death originally, and then they just picked one knight to die. And then the other big thing is the Catachans should always be near their side objectives, because 10 Catachan or 20 OC. And for some reason, every Imperial Knight player I ever play with doesn't realize that Catachans out OC them.
Yeah.
Well, because they're always like, I'm OC 10, that's mine, and then you go, no, I'm OC 20, I can make it 30 if you'd like.
Yeah.
And then that unit's not healthy, but that's a side note.
Yeah.
Um,
I've done that
so
with. I
yeah,
did it with. I had my opponent had Canis and an Armiger on one objective, and I was like, okay, well here's 10 Catachan. He's like, Overwatch, kills three of them. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I dropped Gaunt's Ghost, and he's like OC 21, and they're like, hmm. Anyway, sorry,
I for a
continue.
while was running Kriegsman with command squads, and you'd sit there and be like, yeah, my 26-man unit is 104 OC.
It's very healthy. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the night matchup usually. When I play against matchups where I'm like, wow, my opponent played super well, it's very slow,
Hmm.
because there's usually a lot of prioritization on them just going, I need to shoot you off of everything because I can't step out. And that matchup just didn't really play this way. It's supposed to be a very give and take. Like, I step on objective, you have to kill me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you ever step on an objective.
Yeah.
And instead, my opponent just won on every objective. I rolled pretty bad, and they still lost tonight turn one. And it's like, yeah, this is how the matchup goes. You don't stack check infantry guard because we're both stat checks, and mine is actually decent into this matchup.
Yeah.
Because
Fair enough.
he had double thermal cannon also. And
Oh
like, yeah,
yes.
yeah, no,
Cool.
this is
Two guardsmen. You got him.
yeah. So that one went fast. We were done within like
Yeah.
an hour 15.
Oh,
And then
before we go
moved on.
too much further here, we will get to the next game. I know a lot of people are going to ask, where are the psychers in the Krieg units?
The Premier Psychers,
Yeah.
I hate them. I hate them so
Why?
much. So first off, your unit that is meant to stand on an objective and go, "Hey, deal with me," should not be 250 points. That's the first thing. It's
Hmm.
too much on the price total, for how little it adds. And when I say how little it adds, right, the 5 Feel No Pain on that the Marshal gives them, I forget the exact number off the top of my head, but it makes the squad like 50 something, whatever the number is, more resilient. It is noticeable. And the fact of the matter is, a 4-up invuln into a take cover covered Kriegsman squad is only relevant into AP2 plus, and 90% of opponents are not going to be putting AP2 plus stuff into you to begin with. And if they are, it's not stuff you would spend 60 points for a psyker, right? You're not going to be like, man, I'm getting hit by too many las cannons. I need a psyker. Right, and that's
Yeah.
just how it is. And so the psyker really isn't that relevant. And then the other key thing too is the Kriegsmen stand on an objective, and so for a lot of melee armies where you aren't forming a Catachan wall, they are the response that your opponent goes into. And the issue with the Psyker is it's shooting phase only. And so the Marshal is so much more relevant if you're debating between the two to take into
Hmm.
things like Eight Bound and Jackals and other stuff. So too many points and just doesn't accomplish a role that the list needs filled. It
Cool.
does accomplish a role, but the list doesn't need it.
I think you've said everything that I have made the argument about, like why I never really use psychers. So I'm glad that
Yeah,
that pretty much everything you said echoes it. Don't run
yeah,
them. They're a waste of
yeah.
points. Anyway, let's go ahead and start talking about the next one. We play up against GSC Host of Ascension, and was this the? It looks like Primus with the big neophyte brick, and then bunch of other
Yeah.
normal GSC things.
it was yeah, index GSC with a few more vehicles than you would usually see.
Hmm.
I think between rock grinders and trucks there were four of them, but there was a lot more than you would usually see.
Yeah.
Um, this list is the age-old thing that I always warn every person about when they're dealing with equivalents, which is because like Death Guard players make this mistake all the time with their Death Shroud Termies, where I look at my opponent and I went, hey, just so you're aware, you probably shouldn't start that much stuff off the board. And they always ask why, and you go, it's because if I go first, two equivalents will come down turn two. I will revive one of them. Two equivalents will come down turn three, and then all of your reserves will die. And that's exactly what happened in this matchup. I went first. I moved up and played very aggressively to force him to come out, so that I could hammer, kill a lot of his stuff that was on the table. And then turns two and three, I full screened the board between the 40 equivalents, and I said, hey, for the rest of the game, you get one 3-inch deep strike, and that is all you get. Um, and it very quickly just turned into a game they couldn't come back from.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that's something that's a strength of the list that I don't think most people would have thought about until you said it. So
yeah.
yeah.
You take your 200 bodies and you're screening the table.
Yeah.
You don't get to put things down. I've had games where I've been able to fully 3-inch screen the table as well. It's
Wow.
you do not deep strike this list at all.
Yeah.
I the same thing. I had one Death Guard player who's like, oh, I'm gonna put my 18 Death Shots off the table. They all died. Right? It's don't do that.
Yeah.
And so he just wasn't able to recover from only getting two 3-inch deep strikes on 4 or 5.
Yeah. Now I feel like looking at the list, I feel like the pure strain gene stealers should be well positioned to deal with what you're presenting them.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
The issue is they kill whatever they touch.
Yeah.
They're also more points than everything on my list. And that's the argument that a lot of
Yeah.
people get. They go, I have like Tyranid players all the time be like, my Gene Stealers are awesome. They're gonna walk up, kill something, and tag something. And I'm like, okay, that unit's gonna fall back because it's turn one. You didn't give me any other sight lines, and the rest of my army is just going to kill that.
Yeah.
I've now lost 110 points of Kasrkin. You've lost 230 points from your 10 Gene Stealers and your Broodlord. I am happy. Right, even if
Fair
they
enough. Yeah.
revive, it's still fine. And it's like, yeah, like it sucks if it happens, but if the best unit in their list is just trading even, and usually always trading down, I should be happy with that. And that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah. That
Um,
makes sense.
yeah. I try to protect it, obviously. Form Catachan, form Kasrkin.
Yeah, for sure. You want to make sure your opponent is trading down, but yeah, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Cool. Anything else interesting happening in the Gene Stealer game?
Um,
It's okay to say
no, it
no.
was it was a pretty quick one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing to note was also the GSC. Even if you go second, usually everything scouts forward because again, you need to force them to play the game.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want as many things dead as quickly as possible because you do have that ability to just full screen
Yeah.
them for the entire game.
Yeah, I like that phrase that you put in there. Force your opponent to play the game. I'm going to a GT this weekend, and someone asked me, "What's the Scout Sentinel for?" It's like, well, I'm going to put it on the middle objective at some point and force my opponent to play, right?
Yeah.
And that's basically it. But after that, you said you had a game against Kevin with his Chaos Demons. You said this one was on stream. Do you know what channel that's on?
Tabletop Live
Tabletop Live.
covered the
Nice.
game. Yeah.
Cool.
It's also the game I'm the most upset with myself.
Okay.
And that's just because I feel like I played. So after every game, I keep a notebook with me and I write down just simple like what went well, what should I be thinking about for the next
Yeah.
game. And that game I was going back through and I was like, we both just did so many things wrong, just so many things wrong. And like the biggest one, I had to sit down and go back through it because I wanted to make sure I didn't accidentally cheat Kevin out of a win.
Hmm.
But the most important one is the judges win. Yeah, you can totally score your secret mission take a secret mission after Kevin has scored his primary. And that's not at all how it works. It's end of
No.
round 3. It's not start of round 4. And so I took
Okay.
a secret mission. Yeah, I took a secret
Yeah.
mission against Kevin, and I immediately after the game I was like, I totally could not have done this. What happened?
Yeah.
And so that was why I was upset about it. But
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a
I
very odd thing, especially on stream too. I imagine chat was not
yeah.
happy about
Yeah,
that.
there was one person who was like, "How could they do this?" And then they were like, "We don't know." um, but yeah, I had to think back through it, and I was like, I definitely gained 20 points for doing so, but I also didn't try to contest a single objective Kevin was on, and he gained 18 points just for doing that.
Yeah.
And so I was going back through in my mind, I was like, I don't think the score would have changed too much.
Sure. Yeah.
But the big thing with this one is I went into it, and I know a bit about Kevin, right? I know he's like the rank 1 demons player in the world. I know that he is very stat checky, and so because I at the end of round two, I looked at it and went, okay, we're both 200 points. There's a real world we play each other. I sat down and just did the math, and I was like, well, how much should I expect to kill? How bad is this matchup? And I know it's bad because I know that lists that have anti tank just get folded by this list sometimes. Um, Shocker, it's bad. And so the whole game, I played a very very score based game. This is like one of the few times the list didn't try to table people at all. I took every single one of his units that were not the 4 Great Unclean Ones and Rodigus and the 3 Soul Grinders, and I went, these things will die round 1, round 2, and then I will never roll dice again. Um, and that's actually the coolest part because
Yeah.
when people were rewatching the stream and they were looking back on it, if you look at the stream from rounds 3 to 5, I do not make a single ranged attack. I don't roll dice.
Yeah.
Because that's the point I hit. I go, nothing will matter. Like, sure, I can ship 5 damage off a Great Unclean One, but it doesn't matter. Um, and so the whole point of that game was just Kevin doesn't get to score primary. I don't get to score primary, and so it's going to come down to secret missions and secondary objectives. And so that's exactly how the game played. We both played a game. We're end of the game. I had like 18 primary. Kevin had like 20 something, maybe 19. Um, and he had a perfect 40 on secret secondary missions. I had like 35, and then I ended up sneaking the win because of that secret objective at the end.
Yeah.
Um, should have happened, but again, imagine I just said the exact same sentence, except I'm like, hey, I got 23 and he got,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
10,
for sure.
right? 10 primary.
Yeah.
Um, and I always laugh at that one because there's a point um, where Kevin is doing the Matryoshka thing people talk about in Chaos Demons, where one of them comes down 9 inches, one comes down 6 inches and charges. And I always laugh rewatching the stream. It's in his turn two movement phase where he goes to do that, and we find out after he's done all of this that it was never a legal placement. It was totally like well within 6 inches, well within nine.
Oh no.
Neither of them were actually able to come down there. And I
This
and I
sounds like a
laugh at
disaster.
it. Yeah, and I laugh at it because I took a second and both him and I went. You decided your entire turn based around this, and I remember both and I we just looked at each other and went, "It's okay, you can charge me." And so he does this illegal like 4 inch charge out of deep strike, and I always laugh about that one. But no, he was a great guy. He was probably my favorite match of the tournament
Nice.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is any big learnings from this other than maybe don't shoot at great unclean ones? Make sure you
Yeah.
follow the rules.
Yeah, it's speaking of not following the rules, both of us also completely thought the mission rule wrong. We didn't realize it was the no core strat ones. We thought it was that you can redeploy units, and so we're both using core strats turn one as well. It's such a gross
I've
messy game.
lost games because my
Yeah.
opponent is like, "Wait, you can't Overwatch me." I'm like, "Huh?"
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so maybe we just wipe our hands of this one. We flip
Yeah.
the coin.
Exactly. In terms of actual learning,
Yeah.
the biggest thing with infantry guard is there are a few matchups where you have to go, I cannot actually solve this the way I want to, and that's a normal thing in 40k.
Hmm.
But with infantry guard, is the usual you're going, I can't solve this, and so I'm gonna not play for this objective, or I'm going to not do this one thing. Um, and with infantry guard, it is like I need to change the entire game plan. I'm going to
Yeah.
stop playing to kill. I'm going to start playing to score. I'm going to change all this whole thing. Because the other reason why you have to stop rolling dice is clocks are a thing.
Yep.
And so in that game in particular, we had hour was called in round 3, and I went, okay, that was part of my decision behind stopping to roll dice was I don't want either of us to not finish the game because
Yeah.
of clock, so we're gonna just play for 0 kills. We're gonna play fully for just score denial and primary denial, um, and go about that way. And so the other key thing with infantry guard is it's okay to stop rolling dice because your list breaks parity with objective control. It doesn't break parity with damage. It's good
Hmm.
at damage, but at the end of the day, it's a list with effectively almost 600 OC in it. And so you just very quickly go, this is mine. I don't have to roll dice. Your turn.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes okay.
Cool. Let's go ahead and start talking about the guard mirror that you played next. And this, I think a lot of people would look at this and think this is probably a bad matchup for infantry guard. I'm seeing a lot
No,
of
this is
flamers on chimeras. I'm seeing a lot of not just tank commander demolishers, but normal demolishers who can actually do the
um,
shooting part.
this is my favorite matchup by a
Yeah.
mile. It is so infantry guard favored, and you don't realize it is until it happens. Um, And the fact of the matter is, a lot of guard hinges on Lord Solar, and it just does.
Hmm.
Especially Rogaldorns, right? And you're like, because the second a Rogaldorn is in combat and is not take aimed, and it's
It's
on
standing on
fives,
fives, yeah.
and you're like, this is miserable. It's you're not shooting into vehicles because I don't have any. You're on fives without lethal hits, and you're killing like maybe 5 to 6 infantry now across your 30 shots.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, I have 30 Aquilons. Leontis is dying. And so that's how the infantry guard mirror work goes. The second my turn two hits, all 30 Aquilons just kill Leontis.
Yeah.
I don't care if it takes 20, if it takes 30. I am going to make Leontis's command squad break in half.
Yeah.
And so usually I throw two down because that's mathematically way overkill. Um, and so that's kind of what happened. He staged forward. He did a lot of setup. He put his Scout Sentinels forward. He put his tanks behind them to match the Scout Sentinels. And then I killed the Scout Sentinels. I killed Leontis's brick, and then I petty charged almost every single tank in his army with the two Kriegsman units. Um, and so it just got to a point where he's like, "Yeah, you get to shoot everything." Two squads died.
Yeah.
And then the very next turn after the two squads died, all of his tanks are in plain view because they didn't get to move. All of my guys are in range to shoot them, and now I'm getting Melta in addition to just shooting them. And I think going into his turn three, I believe he had one Rogaldorn, Cadian squad that he reinforced, and Chimera alive. Everything else was dead going into his turn
Wow.
three.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I know. So a couple of things on like the Leontis, Aquilons going after Leontis is one. A lot of people think they have to kill Leontis. No, you just have to kill the bodyguard, and then like Leontis loses half of the reason why you bring him.
yep.
But the other thing, did you see the WTC FAQ that came out this morning?
My team has pinged me 46 times and have been pinging me in the middle of this to read it.
Nice. Yeah, you can servo sentry and then grenade now. So
Yeah,
Leontis is super giga dead now, whereas before he's just like usually dead. So
yes.
it's gotten even better. It's actually a major reason why I imagined like once these came out, I'm sure you took a look at your list and was like, how do I change this? Well, Solar was already not in here, and now anyone who's running Solar with a command brick, they can't screen their home. It doesn't work
Yep.
anymore. So I imagine it's gotten a lot better. But I also imagine this was something that a lot of people looked at where they go, this was supposed to be the good matchup into your list. And I can very, very quickly see that once you get these chargers off, it turns off. Like, they
Um,
can't kill you.
my favorite thing is the amount of people who have very clear reps on their lists, or like people like Kevin, where they're like, hey, we're rank one on our army, we're rank two on our army, we're top 100 in the U.S. And then they play into the list and they're like, this is so much more impressive than I thought it would ever be. It's the best part about the list.
Yeah,
It's the list genuinely punishes you for doing what you should have done when building your list,
fair.
and not a lot of people are expecting that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. So let's go ahead and talk about this Death Guard game.
Oh man, the Death Guard game. The Death Guard game is where I'm upset with myself as a player because for some reason I found out that I just get upset when judge calls happen, and I didn't realize that'd be a thing. Um, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I said something and I knew it was right, and my opponent would like they wouldn't be like, "Are you sure?" They just would immediately call a judge, and for some reason
Oh,
that upset me, and I need to work on that as a player. So that's how
yeah.
I was like, "Oh man, that's what it is," kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
and
to agree there though. Like I think if someone the first thing they do is they call a judge instead of can you show me the rule? Right? I think that
yeah,
should always be the first step because then it's like, okay, here's the rule or like here's the WTC FAQ or whatever it is. And that should usually end most arguments. But as soon as you get the TO, it's like, all right, now the clock is an issue because we have to wait for someone to come over. But anyway.
and it was the type of thing where with both of them, I was like, I can immediately pull up the FAQ. Like I know where this is because I
Yeah.
read it the night before. And they didn't take long because both times the judges would be up and I'd be like, here's the FAQ. You know, right? I didn't have to pull it up to them because I was like, I know it's an FAQ, and that was good enough for them. But
Yeah.
like I was actively pulling it up both times. Um, but the Death Guard matchup was interesting. It was 18 Death Shrouds, Morty, and then 20 men Poxwalker brick with Typhus. That game almost got really messy because I did underestimate the DPS needed to kill the Poxwalker unit. I knew I needed to put a lot of DPS into it, and so I put 20 Kasrkin and two Kriegsman units into it. And one of the Kriegsman units was outside of 12, so no rapid fire, no Melta. But they still ended up living with like 3 or 4, which was a little annoying, because then Typhus, melee kills a bunch of them, and the whole squad was back in a turn. Um, but the big thing with that matchup that like really just swayed everything poorly for them is everyone likes to go, I have flamers. Flamers are good, and it's really easy to just respect all of it. What you should always do in that matchup is they have 6 bodies. They're on 40 mil bases. They have like a 4-inch footprint in terms of total radius, or sorry, total diameter, right? And so every time you go, I'm only going to give you 2 flamers. I'm going to set up my guys within 12 inches of 2 of your models. I'm going to set up my guys within 12 inches of 3 of your models, and one of them is a sorcerer. And so that whole matchup is going, you feasibly cannot. I will never give you an Overwatch that will actually kill my squad.
Hmm.
I will always give you an Overwatch because I want my rapid fire and I want my Melta. But I will only ever give you an Overwatch that is going to kill my 5 las guns because that's all I care about dying. And so the three Death Shrouds did live for most of the game. One of them was dead turn 2, but the other 2 lived for the majority of the game. And just every turn, I would go, okay, what's your 16-inch move plus charge? I'm never going to give you that. What's your Overwatch? I'm never going to give you that.
Yeah.
And so by the time the Death Shrouds ended up getting to actually play the game, there was nothing left on the table. So it was a rather linear game in that regard.
Yeah.
But it's the things that you have to care about usually are pretty easy to pre-measure. And so it's not really like a guard concept, but it's a 40k concept.
Yeah.
Is at least identifying what the monster is that you need to not let play the game, and taking the genuine steps to not let it play the game.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially with like, sometimes people are bringing like a core and Lord of Skulls, and you're just like, okay, well that thing moves, this far. That
eight
means it can't
inches,
it
yeah.
can't see here, so I'm gonna be in this triangle. Cool. And I think that makes a lot of sense when you put it like that, especially with an army that cares. It doesn't really care about any individual model, but just having more of them over the course of the game is always just a huge advantage. So I'm kind of curious then. You said that you haven't really run into any issues. How much of your advantage do you think comes from the fact that you have reps on your army and other people have not played against they probably haven't played against this archetype, and two, they probably haven't played against someone of your caliber with this kind of archetype.
Um, there's a large portion for sure.
Hmm.
I track all of my games on an Excel spreadsheet
Same.
because I'm a nerd. And I might only have like 30-ish in-person games, but I have about 400 games total if we count TTS.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of it's getting close to like 450 at this point, but I have a lot of games on this list. And it is shocking to me how many times people go, "Oh, I'm going to -1 to hit. Now you're on 5s. Oh, I'm AP2. You don't get a save." And you're like, no, I hit on 2s. Now it's 3s. No,
Yeah.
I save on effectively 2s. I still have a 3 up.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy how many people look at this list and they don't realize just how oppressive orders are. And that's the fact of the matter is everyone also asks how you should nerf this list. Orders should be nerfed, respectively. Take cover can put you to 3s. It can't do better. It really shouldn't be able to put you to 3s. It should put you to 4s, right? Like 3 up saves are oppressive in this game. Being able to hit on 2s is oppressive. Being able to have your singular models be OC 3 and 4 is
Mm.
oppressive. Um, Infantry benefit far too far by the orders. Um, so there's a large scale of people who have no clue how much it hurts,
Yeah.
and even the people who know how much it hurts go, okay, I'm just gonna respect the Scions because people know that's the meta unit.
Yeah.
No one realizes that the Kasrkin hit on the exact same profile for the most part. They don't have sustained, but they still have lethals. They still hit on 2s. And they're 60 points cheaper, and lo and behold, they have about 60% less overall DPS, and that should make sense. But the fact of the matter is, for their points, Caster can hit kind of close to where Science hit, and no one realizes that until you've lost your 5 mana Marines to them,
Yeah.
right? And so there is definitely a lot of people who just don't realize how much plasma and how much Melta is in the list until they've lost their entire army of Table turn 2.
Yeah. So have you noticed
Um,
then that people who have played against the list before do a little bit better?
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Because the biggest mistake people make is they look at it like they would Green Tide
Hmm.
or like Righteous Crusaders with Crusader spam. Is they go, this is a horde list. I need to get on the firing lanes ASAP. I need to go shoot and shoot and shoot and hope that by the time they actually crash into me, there's not enough resources left.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, when people do that into infantry guard and they don't realize that I'm not crashing into you. I'm just shooting, right? And so they're oh sorry hiccup. And so by the time I actually get to shoot back, you've lost. And a lot of people make that mistake, and a lot of games are just over like turn two,
Hmm.
turn three because of it. Yeah.
So then how do they, how do people actually find wins against this list? Is it about just finding the go turn where they just kill enough of your army, or like what are the loss conditions?
Um, the loss conditions are still trying to figure some of those out.
Fair,
Um,
yeah.
this this might sound egotistical, but
Yeah.
on those 400 games, I have like a 98.4% win rate with the list, and
Wow.
a lot of them are against WTC players.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where you're like, what counters your list? And I went, I'm not super sure yet. There are things where I look at it and like in a team's matchup, I'm like, this is bad, this is annoying.
Yeah.
Um, but the fact of the matter is, the most basic concept of 40k is parity, and this list wins the objective primary parity game by a landslide.
Yeah. Now,
And so,
I have kind of an idea of what I think you mean by that, but could you explain parity for me and the audience?
yeah, so my ability to stop you from scoring points
Hmm.
is just night and day better than your ability to do so. And so there's this nice degree of parity in 40k usually where both players have similar ways to answer things. They go, hey, I don't want you on that objective. I'm going to charge my unit at you, kill your unit, and then that's now my objective. And then on your turn, you go, I don't want you to hold that, charge my unit, kill you. And the guard doesn't do that. I never have to kill you. And it's really well showcased on that stream game if people want to watch it. Is there's a bunch of times where I go, hey, I'm not killing a single model for the rest of the game, but you're never scoring points again.
Yeah.
And that is a degree of parity that is really unhealthy to break. It's not good for the game.
Hmm.
Because I do have games where I kill zero models and my opponent ends the game with 1,000+ points on the table, but they've lost by like 70, or they've lost like like 70 to 50. They've lost like 20+ points.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why it's unhealthy. Is
Yeah.
yeah, that degree of parity.
Gotcha. I mean, that sounds really core to how you're going to play this list. Is you just break the cycle of, like you said, someone stands on here, the other person kills them off, then the other person standing there, they get killed back. And I think it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. It's just I do not need to play that game. I'm playing a different game by having too many things. So that's really cool. We have gotten close to the hour here, Wesley. So I want to ask for a couple of hot takes. So firstly, we have a codex on the horizon. What are you hoping are we going to be getting in that codex?
Oh God, I'm not hoping for anything. I'm praying for what stays.
Yeah.
Um, because we're losing like 70 data sheets, I'm sure, and I'm just hoping that the ones I like get to stay. So
We know Krieg is staying.
yeah, exactly. Because I don't know, like I really like the Earthshaker carriage battery. It's been a great carrier this whole time.
Hmm.
It's almost for sure gone, right? It's
Probably,
not,
yeah.
yeah. I guess my actual, if you want a hot take, is I want our aircraft to get better.
Ooh,
Um,
that'll be fun.
and I don't know if you can see him here. I can grab him really
I
quick.
see a green
But
thing.
yeah, green thing. So my Valkyrie is broken,
Oh, that
and
is awesome.
right, we kit him with last cans and everything. I want Valkyries to get better.
Yeah,
Um, but also we have a few things that I like aircraft wise seem really cool, and they're just a few points shy. The big one being like the Avenger Strike Fighter. If that thing was like 20 points cheaper, I'd love that model.
yeah.
And yeah, it's so I want it to feel more like, because guard always feels really cool when it's like this. We're combining everything together to cause this slow, unceasing advance that just kills people.
Yeah.
I feel like having like one or two planes would kind of fit that perspective, that narrative a little bit better.
Plus,
At
playing air
least,
cavalry is just the funnest way to play guard, in my
yeah.
opinion.
I like 2 to 3 indirect pieces, like maybe one plane, a few tanks, and then guardsmen to fill out the list, right? Because
Yeah,
that
this
that
list
feels
is
very
not that at all, Wesley. I feel like
yeah,
I'm being wiped.
exactly.
Anyway, cool.
Okay, competitive Wesley and having fun Wesley are two different
I
people.
agree. I agree. So let's go
Yes.
ahead and get the other hot takes I always like to get from people. What unit in the guard index is currently the most overrated? You see it in a lot of lists, and people should take it out.
Oh, oof. I'm
There's a
gonna go
lot of
with
bad
Bulgrin.
ones.
I'm gonna go with Bulgrin, I think.
Bulgrin, okay.
Um, I'm a Bulgrin hater, and I were when they were cheaper as well.
Hmm.
Now, admittedly, everything I play is good into Bulgrins.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I don't think like Bulgrins are awesome, and I get like why in Europe they're awesome because UKTC likes them.
Mhm.
I don't really like them on GW terrain, and I kind of hate everyone who tries to play them because usually you have a really good spot to stage a squad and not three. And every time I play into a guard player who is playing 18 Bulgrin on GW maps, usually one to two of them would die without getting to play the game. And you don't. That's never good, right?
Yeah. Fair, especially now that they're 220. Like I think a lot of people have largely abandoned them, but there are still some holdouts. But
Yes.
the flip side of that, could I get two data sheets that people you don't see anyone playing, and they're right underneath the surface, and you think more people should be looking at them?
Okay, this is the secret tech. Okay,
Secret tech. I love secret
the
tech.
secret tech. It's Ogrim bodyguards for
Ogrim
sure. Um,
bodyguards. Okay.
so the tech is, and I haven't gotten enough reps on this. I might say this, and it's just horrendous. But I played like 5 games with it so
Yeah.
far. It's triple platoon command squad with Ogrim bodyguards and no Attache. And so you have a 100 point unit that with a standard it has a standard has a melta plasma grenade launcher and then plasma pistol power fist. And so for 100 points you get effectively like 13 OC. You get a unit that has the squad is T6
Hmm.
because you use usually you look
Yeah.
at the toughness of the bodyguard. There isn't a bodyguard, so you use the highest toughness of the models in the unit. So that one Ogren bodyguard makes the entire unit T6. You don't have an attache, so you actually get to use the Ogren bodyguard's ability to put wounds on the officer, which gives him a 4 feel no pain. And so you have a 6 wound, you have effectively 6 wound officer and effectively 7 wound Ogren bodyguard, and then 4 other models. And so you have an effectively 13 wound unit with a 4 up save, OC 13 for 100 points that can self order themselves.
That's that's not bad. Okay.
Yeah,
I have never
I think
seen
it's good.
someone do that. Okay. It's I think it sounds like it's worth trying at the very
Yes.
least. And then is
Um,
go ahead.
I was gonna say I think Catachan need to get hit before that sees play. But I think if you compare that to what other armies have for 100 points, it's above the par, right? It's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of people underestimate is how deep the guard index really is. But let's get one more underrated thing, or secret tech perhaps.
Oh goodness. One more other rated thing is it's not good for WTC, but it's really fun on GW. Is the Storm Sword.
Oh, I love
Um,
the Storm Sword,
it's
but I even I stopped playing. I was playing it a lot on player placed, but it's so hard to move.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
I mean, the one thing that always gets some people is the commentary where everything is actually allowed to go over walls, not just things with fly. And so you look at people, you're like, okay, I'm gonna go 2 in the air, climb over, 2 down or whatever it is, and then
yeah.
go over the wall. That's always fun to do. Um,
But you're
I don't
seven
know, it
inches
just
wide, so you're
you're
like,
7 inches wide, yeah. But it shoots harder than Angron fights, right?
yeah,
And that is just crazy. I don't know. It's weaker. The issue that I have is almost everything in guard right now is in that lovely ballpark of this is A tier to S tier or C tier to D tier. And I don't think there's a lot of B tier units. Like the Ogre and Bodyguard, I'm down for.
yeah,
Um, but like, you know, like a Wyvern. No one's playing a Wyvern. No one's playing a Praetor. No one's playing any of our aircraft. And
yeah.
so if I had to pick, I think I'd pick Storm Sword because I think it's like that top of the C tier, like just barely within that B tier, but it's still suboptimal.
Yeah. I
Um,
cannot wait to, when we do the roundtable and I get to listen to you and Robert Moreland talk about like how good a Storm Sword actually is, because he's been playing it this entire edition. He swears by it every single time. I know his list went up like 200 points off of the last MFM, so we'll see if he's still on that train, but it'll be a good time. But
fair
anyway,
enough.
Wesley, before I let you go, is there anywhere like social media or any like podcasts or anything that you're a part of that we should be checking out?
I am not, sadly.
You're not. All right. Well,
No,
cool.
no.
So you're just gonna have to chill on this one for a little bit. So we used up our hour here. I want to make sure we are getting to everything else. So thank you so much for coming in, Wesley. This has been a lot of fun. For people who are watching, Wesley said he'd be down potentially for a WCW roundtable. I'm gonna try and get some other people. Who are guard players who are going to that event to hopefully talk about things and we can all rant about how dumb the clock rules at that event are going to be, but it should be a lot of fun. Thank you so much once again for coming on, and congratulations on your most recent win.
Yeah, thanks for having me.